Are you tired of watching what's happening on our planet? I'm going to show you humanity's biggest mistake and exactly how to correct it. Here's how we can break the chain of cosmic slavery. Hi, I'm Saratoga Ocean, and I help people to spiritually awaken so they can enter a conscious path of ascension. And if you're new to my channel, welcome. Make sure you subscribe so you catch all my videos to help guide you on your awakening journey. So let's start by taking a look at our overall situation on this earth. Basically, we have really a handful of people who are controlling billions of other people around the entire planet. So why do you think this small number of people have such an advantage over us? Well, you guys, the answer will surprise you. It's because in a very weird sort of way, the controllers are actually more awake than we are. They are actually awake at much bigger, more expanded levels of awareness. They have what I would call full spectrum awareness. See, the vast majority of us are only barely awake, and many, if not most of us collectively, are still entirely asleep. And thus, we are most easily controlled. So let me explain how this works. The main controllers are operating at multidimensional, interdimensional levels of reality, whereas we as a humanity are actually operating at the lowest possible level of physicality alone. The Earth-based controllers are actively and consciously engaged at a co-creative level with the interdimensional beings who control us at higher levels. Whereas we as a humanity are too asleep to even be able to perceive the higher dimensional beings of light who can help us, much less are we able to even co-create with them. See, we mostly rely on religious beliefs from old books rather than relying on the reality of our actual situation. Now, the other thing is that the controllers have no question whatsoever about the existence of extraterrestrials. In fact, many of them believe that they actually are extraterrestrial or of extraterrestrial lineage. And in some cases, they actively negotiate with other extraterrestrial species on a regular basis. Whereas we, on the other hand, feel completely foolish and embarrassed if we so much as even see an extraterrestrial craft. We just stay silent and we keep it to ourselves because we're so afraid that people are going to think we're crazy. Now, that's quite a discrepancy when you look at the difference between those two scenarios, right? So the sad thing is that the controllers in many ways are actually more conscious than we are. So here's how you can look at this in order to understand it better. Let's imagine a spectrum of consciousness and awareness. Let's talk about a spectrum of awareness that includes 5 different levels: physical, metaphysical, multidimensional, interdimensional, and finally extraterrestrial. So the controllers are actually awake on all 5 of those levels. They are consciously awake and aware at the full spectrum of all 5 levels. Whereas we as a humanity, for the most part, only awake at the lowest possible level of physicality. So do you see the difference there, you guys? We've got full spectrum awareness of all 5 levels for the higher level controllers. And for the masses of billions of people on this planet, only awake at the lowest level of the physical. So if you look at it in this way, you can see based on this scale that the controllers actually have full spectrum dominance over the rest of us. And we as a collective only have enough consciousness to eke out survival on a physical level. So unless we wake up in a really big way, we risk losing this battle for our souls. So let me frame this in another way that makes it even easier for you to see the difference. I want you to bring to mind for just a moment What is the goal of the controllers? Think about what their goal is and what it is they intend to manifest. It is to completely dominate and subjugate an entire planet of life. Now, here's something I want you guys to imagine. Picture for a moment if the controllers who have that goal that I just named, imagine if they were to look at all of us as a collective humanity and said to themselves, you know, this is what we want to manifest, dominate and subjugate an entire planet of life. Let's look at them as a model for what we need to do and how we need to be in order to achieve our goal. So what if they were to use us as their model? This is what they would have to say to themselves. They would study us and say, okay, in order to achieve this goal, what is it that we have to do? Well, number one, we have to harbor extreme doubt that we are capable of achieving it. And number two, we have to worry incessantly about what others might think of us to the point of just, withdrawing and repressing ourselves so that we don't offend anyone. And number three, we have to wait around for thousands of years for some higher being to come from the skies and achieve this goal for us. And number four, we have to constantly criticize ourselves and say that we're just not really worthy of succeeding at this goal. Oh, and number five, we have to sit around passively and wait for someone else to tell us what to do. And then let's add number six. Well, we also need to sit passively by and just kind of wait for something to happen. And finally, number seven, the most important one, we have to say that it's God's job to achieve this goal. It's not ours. Now that kind of gives you a picture of why we're not exactly the best models for manifestation in the wider cosmos, are we? But see, that's not what the controllers do, is it? No, they work at a metaphysical level. I mean, I think it's a pretty well-known fact that they like to engage in all sorts of satanic metaphysical rituals. I mean, they will even take drugs to communicate interdimensionally because for the most part, they're not really capable of doing that on their own. And hey, they have no issues at all with the existence of extraterrestrials. See, the controllers get lots of interdimensional help because they operate on the same wavelength as the interdimensional extraterrestrial creatures who ultimately control the entire situation. So look at it this way. These Earth-based controllers are totally connected to the dark forces in those other realms because they're functioning on the same wavelength that they are. Whereas we as a humanity are mostly disconnected from the higher forces of light that wish to help us because we're just not on the same wavelength that they are on. See, the controllers function in a co-creative mode with those dark forces. Whereas we as a collective humanity, our mode is more like, oh, help me survive this. That's really the mode that we put ourselves in when it comes to the forces of light. So how come we're in that mode? Well, here's a really interesting fact. One of the main reasons that we are so handicapped and operating mostly at a physical level only is because we have been brainwashed into this savior complex. We collectively do not believe that it is really our job to do anything about this situation. We say to ourselves it's either God's job or it's up to some invisible savior to come and make things right. And then even more, we say that that perspective equates a good person. And this is reflected in the kinds of things that we tend to ask of the higher realms of light. We ask things like, where's my twin flame? When am I going to meet my soulmate? Or how can I make more money? Or am I going to be moving anytime soon? Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those questions. I'm just saying that we do not operate at a level that gives us a perspective to ask much higher level questions that pertain to our bigger situation on this planet. Now, if you think about it, all of those questions that I just mentioned that we tend to ask of the higher realms, Think about this, you guys. Those are all questions that are limited to life on a physical level. So you can see how our questions reflect the fact that we operate mostly at a physical level of reality. And if we want to look at our planetary situation overall, when we only deal with this on a physical level, we generally tend to fail. And I'm talking about failure at the level of the cosmic fact that we are a slave planet. So I want to share an interesting little story with you. I was recently looking at a video of David Icke at Trafalgar Square with a whole bunch, I guess tens of thousands of people gathering on the subject of freedom. Now, there are lots of protests going on all over the world right now, but there was something about this gathering that struck me as very different. His words were vibrationally very, very different. See, they didn't seem like words of protest. They were more like words of power. His words vibrationally had real power. And here's why I think that is. Because he was clearly speaking from the same full spectrum level of awareness that the controllers operate at. And that's because he knows what's going on in that full spectrum of awareness. He knows what's happening at all 5 of those levels. So at one point in this gathering, maybe you guys saw it or some of you saw it, he was yelling the word freedom. And the way that sounded to me was sounded like an affirmation that vibrationally reverberated throughout that entire full spectrum of awareness. And I'm going to bet that he fully intended to reach consciousness at all 5 levels vibrationally with everything he said, and with saying that word freedom in the way that he said it with such strength and power. Because see, it did not seem to me like just some guy just yelling only at a physical level. Because if that's all it was, I don't think it would have felt like it had that level of power. And I think by doing that, he actually made it possible for the entire crowd to fully energetically resonate at all 5 levels with him, even if they weren't aware that that's what was happening. Anyway, that's how the whole thing struck me. Now, I want to share one more thing with you all that I think empaths need to be aware of. Now, I have heard that the earth-based controllers need to use hallucinogenic drugs in order to communicate with the interdimensional beings that they communicate with. And that would be because they don't have the ability to do that naturally. But here's the thing. There are millions of us as light workers who actually came here with our multidimensional senses wide open. We have the power to do a lot of things naturally. We call it being an intuitive empath. But unfortunately, because we are trained to be passive slaves at a physical level, here's what happens. Instead of being able to put those intuitive senses to positive use interdimensionally, we end up bombarded and crushed by a whole lot of energy that we don't know what to do with. And then we can end up withdrawn and sometimes even depressed. Now, I guess I would consider myself an intuitive empath for sure. But I don't really have a problem with it because I truly function at all of those 5 levels that I talked to you guys about. So I don't feel the least bit crushed by that capability. I really see it as an empowering asset. In fact, I don't even want to label myself as an intuitive empath because the label to me just seems kind of pointless. See, once you wake up at those 5 levels of awareness, you're just present. You don't need to really call yourself anything. I think the reason we tend to use the word intuitive empath, and I don't have a problem with using that word at all, believe me, because I think it's actually helpful if you're really struggling with your own natural multidimensional, interdimensional capabilities and you don't know what to do with them. It's helpful to just have a way to talk about it. But I don't really feel a need to label myself because it's just really about being fully present. When you're fully present, you're not overwhelmed anymore. When you're only present at a physical level, you can get really overwhelmed by all the energy that gets piled on to your energetic openness and your ability to connect interdimensionally with other realms. Now, here's a really cool thought for you guys. Can you imagine what would happen if the legions of light workers and starseeds on this planet woke up at the same level of confidence that the controllers have? I mean, it would change everything. So let's talk about how we can start to fill that gap between the physical and that higher level that goes all the way up to extraterrestrial. First thing you want to do is stop with the self-doubt. If you have had extraterrestrial experiences or metaphysical experiences, give up the apologetic attitude. Stop believing that your standard has to match the same standard level of thought that people who live like controlled slaves have decided to embrace. Stop acting like this is necessary in order to be socially acceptable. I mean, what does socially acceptable even mean anymore in the way the world is today? I mean, does it mean you stay home and wear a mask and that's it? Understand as well that the reason you need a high vibration, and that means your energy is not repressed, is not apologized for, is not buried and hidden away in some metaphysical closet. The reason you need a high vibration is because it moves you closer to those higher beings of light who are extending a hand to help us. It moves you closer to being at their energetic wavelength. And then you have to give up the addiction to all of the mind-controlled beliefs that we've been fed all of our lives. Most of all, you need to believe in yourself and believe in your heart. The more that you give your attention to these types of transformation within yourself, the sooner you will be able to begin to fill that gap and enter into that full spectrum of awareness and empowerment that I was talking about. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it out with your friends. And be sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell, because I am here with new videos every Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday to guide you on your awakening journey. And with that, I'm sending you loads of love, light, and positive energy. I will see you in the next video. Namaste.